let alone a form of social justice. Today, I would like to share a little from my religious tradition, Islam, and research I found to inform some of the dimensions in which kindness can influence a collective responsibility toward bond with the dimensions of racism. They are internalized, interpersonal, and societal or structural. So when you get on an airplane, they tell you to put your oxygen mask on first before you help others. As we know, this is because we cannot help others if we ourselves are incapacitated. Darwin was one of the first to see humans as profoundly social and caring, despite his work with various species on the notion of survival of the fittest. He argued that sympathy and caring for others is actually instinctual. Today, the research tells us that sharing our resources with others rather than having more for yourself brings lasting well-being. Performing acts of kindness fills our bucket. There is a Be Nice movement around West Michigan in which students and adults work together to look for signs of, that someone is struggling with their mental illness. The idea that simple words of care, concern, and kindness can make a life or death difference to someone is important to remember. We share the responsibility to use words of affirmation to ourselves and to dwell in spaces that are uplifting to our soul. Individual members of society feeling internally stable and loved is a necessary part of creating a society that can be just and kind. Typically, when we think of kindness, it's around interpersonal interactions. And truly, the biggest impact we can have on others feels like it happens in those simple acts of kindness we can show to each other on a day-to-day basis. Holding the door open, helping someone carry a heavy load, actively and sincerely listening, sharing advice, or helping someone in a time of need. These little ways we connect with make us feel good. They make others feel good, and then we can see this love spread. This little societal ripple is important to maintain. However, most of the time, this type of kindness centers around people you naturally connect with or people you know. What happens when we need to practice kindness with someone we don't see eye to eye with? How do we connect with those we disagree with? The research tells us that facts don't convince people. Emotions and relationships do. Our brains have evolved to help us survive rather than to be factually accurate. So we respond better to social and tribal dynamics than facts. Even if it doesn't make sense, even if it's wrong, it's actually safer for us to agree with our group and stay united than to disagree and isolate yourself. Our brain is constantly trying to protect our worldview and identity, so much so that when our worldview is threatened or challenged, the same part of our brain that processes physical danger is activated. This explains why people react with anger towards information that proves them wrong, and why it's hard to have non-heated political debate. Research also tells us that we lack empathy. Studies found that if people are broken into groups of any kind, we become less empathetic to members of other groups. Our instinctive ability to dehumanize other groups is what makes societal atrocities like slavery, genocide, or even what we see today with separating families at the border possible. If you want someone to consider information that contradicts with what they believe, you first have to prevent their brain from seeing you as a threat. Find ways to identify as part of their group. Maybe you went to the same high school. Maybe you live in the same neighborhood. Maybe you play the same sport. Also be aware of the fact that you may be wrong or you're completely uninformed. Honestly admitting that will model that it's okay to be wrong. Knowing that facts matter as much as relationships is an important factor in effectively promoting understanding. We also know that kindness helps build empathy, and that intertribal understanding can develop using acts of kindness as a tool. We have to be able to get past our differences. So how do we build relationships that promote kindness? Our two main behavioral guides in Islam are the Quran, which is our holy book, and Hadith, which are the traditions of the life of Prophet Muhammad. We believe that these are the best examples of how we should behave. I hope these ideas will provide inspiration of how to develop our mindset around kindness. I would like to share a few stories from the Hadith and Quran which exemplify kindness towards those who we do not agree with. Please remember these examples do not apply to people who are dangerous or might harm us. We always try to avoid those people for our safety. Just in case. Omar Suleiman, a prominent imam who is a leader for social justice, teaches us that every person you meet will interact with you in one of two ways. It will rarely be equal. One way is that the person will go above and beyond in kindness and do more for you than maybe you deserve. You have a responsibility to not milk it and be gracious in their kindness by paying it forward. Or the second way a person will treat another, is with deficiency. The person does the absolute minimum in their interaction with you, or maybe even isn't just or fair. So either you are doing more or they are doing more. Via the hadiths, the scholars said that you should be forgiving of people of deficiency, but you must always try to deal with people with a standard of excellence. An important part of treating others well is that you do not let them bring you down to their level. As you interact in the world, think about your interactions in this way. It's not about keeping score, rather it's about striving for excellence in practicing kindness, forgiveness, and love, even when it's hard to do so. When the opportunity to take revenge presents itself, you must forgive and pardon. We do not excuse their actions, we just do not perpetuate them. Another example from the life of the Prophet comes from one of his companions, a Libyan warrior named Omar Mukhtar, who captured two Italian soldiers. One of Omar Mukhtar's generals said, "Let's mutilate them and make an example of them, the way they kill us when they capture us." Omar Mukhtar said, "We do not kill our prisoners. We aren't people who do that." The general reiterated, "They do it to us." Then Omar Mukhtar said, "They are not our teachers. We do not learn the ethics of character of anything from them. We will not sink to their level." Nowadays, we have terrorist organizations saying they kill our children, so we should kill theirs. What do those children have to do with the actions of their parents? So who is in control of that situation? Evil, wrong, revenge, hatred is in control. We have lost sight of kindness. At every turn, even during the worst of times, when we don't remember kindness, mercy, and love, we perpetuate the opposite. Furthermore, to win the hearts of those you govern or those you share a community with, we constantly have to ask ourselves if we are taking the higher moral ground. Kindness towards our neighbors is a very important concept in Islam. Another hadith says there are three people most loved by God. It is said that one of the most loved by God is a person who has a bad neighbor, yet bears it with patience and kindness. There's a story of one of the companions of the Prophet who had a super rowdy neighbor who came home drunk every night. Then he would scream at the top of his lungs that no one remembered him, that he had been forgotten. One night there was no screaming, so the Prophet's companion went next door to check on him, and he wasn't there. And then the companion went looking for him and found him locked up in jail for a heavy debt. The companion paid off his hefty debt and reminded him that he was not forgotten. The neighbor turned his life around and became a better person because of the kindness shown by one individual. The opposite of kindness towards our neighbors is shared in a hadith that says that the one whose neighbor does not feel safe from harm from him will not enter heaven. Harm does not necessarily mean danger, but even that you don't bring peace to your neighbors. Part of your neighbor's right is that you don't play loud music, that you mow your lawn on time, that you show care for your community. The seriousness of this relationship is expressed by Prophet Muhammad when he said that although he was always excellent in kindness and care towards his neighbor, Angel Gabriel would come to him and repeatedly say to show kindness towards your neighbor, so much so that the Prophet thought that God would command that part of your inheritance should go to your neighbors. In a way, that hadith shows that your neighbor is almost like your family. The Prophet's kindness was routine, and he always knew what ailed his neighbors and how they were doing before they told him. Kindness is almost out of our cultural norm. How much do we know about how our neighbors are doing? Or do we pick and choose which neighbors we check in on? I know I'm guilty of that. I wonder to what extent kindness would create bridges of understanding. I personally have experienced the utmost generosity and kindness from one of our neighbors. A few years ago, my husband had foot surgery, which put him out of commission for the whole of winter. And at the time, I had 3 young children. It was one of those winters that snowed like crazy, and I remember we had to shovel multiple times in the day. And this neighbor was always the first one out, snow blowing his driveway. My husband reached out to him, and they also happened to be a transplant from California, so we struck up an immediate friendship with them. Now that we humbly asked him if he would mind snow blowing our driveway in the morning, and as my husband hung up the phone, he was shaking his head in disbelief. I asked him what happened, and he said not only did our neighbor say yes, he thanked us for asking him. I couldn't believe the generous, loving kindness with which he helped us in a time of need. He exemplified the excellence we are expected to demonstrate to our neighbors. We experience kindness on various levels. There's the day-to-day practice of kindness when we as members of society have the opportunity to treat someone from a range of emotions, from a loving embrace to completely insignificant and unseen. In Islam, your smile is even considered an act of charity, so even that simple gesture can open the doors of acceptance and belonging for the other. Furthermore, there is the way in which we interact with society in general. What are the systems of kindness we can implement to make our communities, our government, our societal structures better? In this way, we see that kindness and responsibility are intertwined. We have to take responsibility for others and do it with kindness, even if we completely disagree with that person's beliefs. An example of this is when Prophet Muhammad came back to Mecca, his birthplace and home, after being forced to migrate to Medina. The migration was necessary because Muslims were being killed in Mecca when the Prophet had professed his belief in Islam. After some time in Medina, Islam spread and was widely practiced all over Arabia. He went back to Mecca as he had always longed to do. Mecca was the home of the people who had killed his family, killed his loved ones, killed the loved ones of his companions. How would you treat someone who had killed family members or killed your friend's family members? Upon arrival in Mecca, the Prophet asked them, "What should I do with you?" This established his legal authority over the people, and everyone knew he was their judge. It was their choice, it was his choice as to what punishment they would receive. Remember, in Islam, we also have an eye for an eye in our judicial type of justice system. The Prophet then, in human benevolence, forgave them without retribution. This story, similar to our judicial system, can serve as an example of not perpetuating hatred and killing. We need to move from our silos where structurally we depend on a certain course of action for a certain crime. Remember, we always have room for kindness in our systems. In Surah Al-Araf, verse 199, the Quran says, "Keep to forgiveness and enjoin kindness and turn away from the ignorant." Prophet Muhammad asked Angel Gabriel for clarification on this verse and was told that Muslims should forgive the one who oppresses you and give to the one who has withheld from you and seek the ties of kinship from the one who has cut you off. Think of a current day situation that involves oppressors who have withheld human rights. Think of the babies and children being held in detention centers, ripped from their parents because of a choice their parents made out of desperation and despair. Could we imagine forgiving these oppressors? Could we imagine acting kindly towards them? For example, could we imagine acting kindly towards them? Or, for example, the white supremacists in Charlottesville carrying torches chanting, "Jews will not replace us." To forgive and give justly to the oppressor is an inspirational act of kindness. As this verse also states, you seek a relationship with someone in your family who has broken ties with you. This is also a form of kindness. Families are part of the web that holds society together. When families are stronger, so is society. While these acts of forgiveness seem impossible to fathom, these specific forms of kindness prevent the injustice that divides society to be perpetuated by the oppressed who might want to retaliate or seek vengeance for injustices that were committed against them. Kindness has the power to break the cycle of violence. Kindness is the start of reconciliation and justice. Everything I have touched on today feels almost superhuman to practice. And when you think about it, we're just talking about kindness. I too struggle with quieting my ego when I'm snubbed by someone or moving past feelings of hurt when I've been wronged. I don't practice kindness the way I would like to with patience and sincerity. I'm working on it. Knowing that research says I have to do the hard work of connecting with and building relationships with someone I disagree with to create societal change inspires me to be more kind. Knowing that paying it forward might mean showing kindness towards someone I really dislike as a way of showing gratitude for all the abundance of kindness I have received. Knowing that hate breeds hate, that I have a responsibility to make this place, this world, I choose a better place. I choose to practice kindness, to keep trying at least, and I hope you will join me. Thank you.